Sydney Bubble. A brief understanding on my terminology that I created Sydney Bubble. Sydney Bubble is you're comfortable, you're familiar with the settings you're around. But once you stay out of it, it's a complete different story. You feel like you're left out, there's no sense of belonging. You feel like you're not being accepted and treated that way. But this is coming from my experience. I can't speak for everyone's experience who lives in Sydney to go from different area. Usually I'm talking about this as a high socioeconomic area, but I guess it's depending on your background, your experience, and the way how they've been treated. That's a bit of sense. I'll explore a bit more longer. So what actually made me make this video? And I stumbled across this channel a while back, but I never had the chance to regularly, watch her channel, which is Jasmine Amma or Anna. It's just pretty much a YouTuber who, who speaks about social work and her experience, her journey, education. And I like that because I'm studying the field and I just wanted to know from a social worker, perspective, in which she graduated her degree 3 years ago and now she's a practitioner. And she's speaking about like her struggles, her like sense of belonging in certain areas in Sydney, and feels like she doesn't fit in, even though she's been living in Australia for 13 or 16 years, but she still finds a struggle. And whether it's racism or things like that, that is something that I kind of wanted to dig through just to have a better understanding from my point of view. I did comment on the video, but I'll talk about it towards the end. So first things first, those who doesn't know, James Captain Cook is one of the most famous, popular British Navy explorer or navigator. He navigates the world and finding islands and things like that. He also identified, located Australia. So he was the founder, pretty much, just located. On 1788 year, January the 26th, James Captain Cook, and as well, the Queen brought Arthur Phillip to establish this country. Now, first things first, Arthur Phillip brought in, which the Queen wants to colonize this land, but by using overflow of convicts in the UK or British. I don't know what was that like in 1788. So he brought convicts and as well skilled labor people who can do the job. So pretty much Arthur Phillip brought people and tools, anything on this fleet. But majority of the first fleet was all men because majority of them are convict. The second fleet was all female, so majority of it is female. So we'll stay on this topic. So Arthur Phillip brought everything in, established New South Wales, and mainly New South Wales established and cities, and he established, like agriculture, urbanization, and it was towards the end of the agricultural revolution. So we just entered industrial revolution and globalization as well. If it's industrialized, we got into a very interesting stage. So that's what's happening. I can't talk too much information about it because you guys want to know the truth about Sydney Bubble. So one of the comment that I made, I talk about, where I'm from, and I really moved to Melbourne, and I just, I talk about the Sydney Bubble, and I talk about, Eastern Hill, Shire, and North Shore, and I'll talk about, the African culture in Footscray. Melbourne's filled of different nations of African flags, and proud, and Sudanese, Ethiopian restaurants everywhere, which I never get to see that in Sydney. I'm not sure about nowadays Sydney, but from what I remember after I left, I've been to Blacktown, Liverpool, Campbelltown, like Bankstown, Parramatta, I just inner west and bit of Upper Shire side, like Hurtsville around there, but I don't get to see much of the African community. But what I do know, when I've been brought up in Sydney, is like, I know I'm generalizing this, but I'm only saying from my what I've been taught. And people are really, there's a lot of hate towards the African community as being a bludger, or welfare and things like that. So that was always been brought. I think there's a very strong of the minority social hierarchy. Very strong emphasis in Sydney. I realized that very strong. And obviously those Anglo-Saxon, and then it goes down, Europeans and go down, Asian and go down, Middle Eastern goes down. There was a category of all that, but you know what? Before I touch on more, let's talk about the map. So this is Sydney, and I mentioned about the hills. The hills is pretty much, we're talking about around here. The hills is around down here. And North Shore, that's where most of the corporate jobs. I'll find a different color so you guys. So here, North Shore is up there. Sydney Harbour Bridge is just down here. So Northern Beaches as well up there. This is where the most of the job, I'm not saying most of the job, but that's a luxury area. And I mentioned about this is the Shire. I think the Shire is after the bridge. I think Shire is beneath, down there. I know it's down there. I mentioned Campbelltown. So we got the inner west down here. Gosh, sorry, my circle's a bit big. The eastern suburbs. And you got the southwest. So yeah, pretty much here southwest. Western suburb. Those are the western suburbs. So what I mentioned, like even up here is kind of be like right, hill. It won't be hill, but it should be right up here. I don't know. I'm not sure what's the district to call it down up here. But anywho, you kind of get okay, it will be Macquarie Park. No, Macquarie Park is down there, So it's pretty much I talk about like when I mention on my I mentioned on her video, on my comment, saying that when I'm around here or here, or I can't say, just down there, here, and a bit up there. And it's classified the ghetto suburbs, like with a minority. Like if you talk about Bankstown, they talk about the Middle Eastern. And if you talk about like certain suburbs, it's like multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is pretty like a multicultural, diverse suburbs is what I've just highlighted. Scenes, there's some around there, but if you go step out of this bubble, so what I'm trying to say is this bubble, right? If you try to step out the bubble, or some of these bubbles might have not as very vibrant multiculturalism. Alright, I know around here, yeah, around here is alright, but like if it's the suburb or the area that you're in, that is not largely minority, but largely Anglo or European, alright, Caucasian, that's the word for it, Caucasian, more professional word, Caucasian. If you're in a Caucasian suburban comparison, the Sydney bubble that I mentioned to you guys, right? If you stay within this bubble, and some of these suburbs, I can't say all of them, but some of these suburbs are literally just not as very diverse. It's just once you step out this bubble, this ring, right, and you go out to a different bubble, and essentially what happened is you do create no sense of belonging. I felt like I shouldn't be here, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that, and you feel like it's like the society sees it as very different. I don't know why, but even when I was with my father to go to, I think it's Concord Concord, even though it's largely Italians, but those any of the suburbs that's not like like multicultural, very strong, or any migrants, it's just you feel like you're left out. You feel like you're second class citizen, and it just frustrates to understand what's going on. And as well, there's a lot of areas that I can talk about, like little areas. You do not you not have direct eye contact with especially with anyone, but especially towards the Anglo-Saxon or Caucasian. I don't have the eye contact. It feels like you want trouble. You want to start trouble. You want to start something. What's the matter? What do you want? And I feel like the roughness is coming through. Same as the trains, public trains. I especially talk about the trains. Trains are double deckers, and you can rotate the you call it the bench or the seats, right? You can rotate whether you like to face towards someone's back of their head. You don't like to face towards their eyes or their face, and you create that sort of bubble. Like you try to be your own, but if someone steps within your personal space, then things gets a bit more, it gets a bit more threatened. You're alarmed. When I was in Sydney, I was like that. But also, you'd be judgmental when those who are very different, like those who are in an interracial relationship, or perhaps those why he has blue hair, or why he has silver hair, why he's wearing like this. Like, we're very judgmental as well when I was in Sydney. But there's a lot going on. But I don't know how this video makes you understand what's the Sydney bubble, how much an impact it does. It creates a huge impact, and it's not a friendly place to be in. And pretty much, you just do what you gotta be told. You keep your distance, no face to face, no looking eye contact. It's like offensive. It's like threatened. And I felt like maybe this is something kind of come from inherited back from the convicts, the culture, like maybe it's come from roughness. And I always feel like there's this roughness going on when I was in Sydney as well. Maybe because I'm coming from a low socioeconomic area, but I feel like there's so much. You got to be rough to stay in the game in Sydney. But other than that, it's a tough nut. But now you kind of understand why I'm talking about this Sydney bubble. Once you step out of this bubble and step out your comfort zone, it feels like you're stepping out a new world. And I remember a while back ago, I had this gay classmate. We're talking about like probably 2011. Gay classmate, and he's always been used to living in Potts Point. That's one of the most expensive area in the city, and prestigious area for the LGBT community as well. So he had a job, a day job offer out of nowhere to work in Lakemba, and he's Caucasian. I'm not sure what his actual background is, but he's Caucasian. And he said when he went to Lakemba, he's like, geez, I'm from a different world. I'm in the bloody Middle East. Like, I'm in Australia, but somehow I'm in the Middle East. And this comes from, as I mentioned before, the suburban ghetto cities, like minority ethnics. Like, you pretty much can be judgmental. Cabramatta, VX, like, I'm trying to pull things on top of my head. It's so hard. But yeah, it's trying to, like you go to like Chinese Burwood, Koreans Strathfield, and then you got Lickham, Asian, and then you got like more and more like suburbs. I can't say top of my head because I haven't been back for a while now. But it just feels like you're categorizing people in certain area, and there's a lot more going on, and it's very tough to break this bubble. And there's this bubble that you need to be met. If you're not met within the bubble, then your things get a bit to, well, let's go to the next slide, my final slide. So here's the response from her. You know, she kind of do agree with it. You know, she can't expect, you know, I think I expect every part of Australia to be like Sydney, and that's probably why I get this overwhelmed and feel out of place. So the sense of belonging, and it's funny how I'm actually making this video because of you know, Melburnians will say the more if you go anything towards New South Wales to Queensland, Darwin, if you go anything further up from Victoria, you get to see a lot more racism and things like that. And I can't say 100% agree, but I only say yes on my personal experience. But also I do get to hear, like, you know, things like that, and just you know, it's hard for me to explain the difference. And this has to go back to linking, as I mentioned to you guys before, with the history. You know, and I replied this message just since then, and it's something got to do with the norm as the First Fleet in New South Wales, mainly convicts. You know, that's where the roughness and toughness embedded. Like, you cannot have a direct eye contact with random people, or you may come across as you know, as a threat. Same goes towards the personal space. There's a strong, very strong limit, which took me a while to settle in Melbourne, as I'm constantly having eye contact or personal boundaries within the personal, you know, public transport. For example, trains in Sydney, regardless who your opposite person or the nearest person to sit with, as mostly rely on your judgment call. Regardless of the ethnic or appearance, you prefer to flip the train seats to face towards the person or back of their head. That's the normal. So what I'm trying to say here is that the trains, you can pretty much flip around, you can adjust around. So let's just say I'm here, I'm facing towards you, and there's the seats is really open, and you can pretty much get on here and sit. Instead of that, I can flip it down here, and I can sit down there, and I'm facing others, you know, others towards the head. It was the norm in Sydney. If you choose to face directly towards the person, if you decided to not to flip the seats, if you decide to sit like that and have eye contact, it feels awkward as hell. And you know, where the whole carriage of the train is facing towards the back of the head. That was the norm. You know, in Melbourne, it took me a long while to have this personal space, and as well seats of fixation, where you must have to look directly eye contact with the opposite person right next to you. So when I was in Sydney, I tend to be choosy. I know many people tend to be choosy unless they're in the rush hour, but they tend to be choosy who to sit next with. So I don't know how am I going to explain this, but let's just say this is the bench, right? You can fit 1, 2, 3. The 6, right? Nah, fuck, this is a lot better. 1, 2, 3, right? In Sydney, you tend to sit. You know, you tend to go. You know, the best of the best is sit next to the window, and after that you sit on the side. Now in the middle, right, you most likely not to sit on it because you use your judgment call. Then you have a closer look whether the person's right, how is it like. Then you use your judgment call whether you want to sit in the middle or not. But most likely you wouldn't like to sit on that position. You feel like you wish that you have a, you know, if there's an empty seat right in front of them, they're most likely to take on that position and flip it and sit on the side. So that's what my frustration. I was accepting this you know, challenge my Sydney bubble to accept this humanity approach. So what I'm saying is that it's actually humanity to look at the person's eyes, to be the personal space. When I'm in Sydney, everywhere I go, I have to do this fake smile. You know, just letting them know I'm friendly. that's in Sydney. That's the only contact you with the people. You have this fake smile like each time you walk past people, you know. But in Melbourne, you do get that, but also not as very strong as Sydney. So that was my elaborating of what's the huge impact. It goes really, really deep, Norm. That's just one of the areas, and other than that, I think it's the personal space and the eye contact was one of the most difficult thing when I moved to Melbourne. Even today, if I move to Sydney, people look at me weirdly if I look at them directly or be in their personal space, because it's not that I'm flirting with them, but I'm just doing it because I'm used to this Melbourne thing. And I find that it's actually makes more sense if you have this sort of stuff. So I'm glad that I can get this video out from a different perspective, and I'll see what's her response. And if I don't have the response, I'll just say bye. But yeah. So she hasn't replied, but I've been having some deep thoughts about the response that I did, and to think about it now, I've realized there is a strong influence of what has New South Wales has grown from being a convict state. That changed the social norm. It kind of makes sense with aggressive toughness to able to survive in the world. It's all about materialistic, very, very strong. If I did a research about how many Mercedes or European cars being sold between New South Wales and Victoria, there will be a lot more in New South Wales. Very, very strong conservative, and it does change a lot of views. For example, the equality marriage passing through the same sex. New South Wales, the state, has the lowest yes votes, followed by Queensland. So definitely there's a lot of cultural conservative going on. Won't be that open-minded. And as well, another area has been bothering me, but it kind of makes sense when I understand now. I wish I have the statistics right in front of me to show you guys, but there's a lot more social securities, that sort of industry, health industry, community industry. There's a lot more jobs in Victoria than comparison to New South Wales, and I think that fundamentally comes straight down to the fact that New South Wales, there's a lot more hardworking people. Where Victoria has the most social security, there's jobs in my industry. Unfortunately, throughout the whole state, I can't just say just strictly based on Victoria and New South Wales. Even though New South Wales has 1 million or 1.5 million more population than Victoria, but yet Victoria has more of this industry. There's a lot more for me to get in. It finds strange, but I guess when it comes to a lot more collectivism, very, very strong collectivism, cultural identity and conservative, and as well as this roughness, toughness, and there was the social norm of being tough, rough. It's all about trying to provide strong, provide what's on the table. Even though the cost of living is a lot higher in New South Wales comparison to Victoria, I find it strange, why there's a lot more social problems. There's a lot more jobs in Victoria comparison to New South Wales, and also that kind of trickle down, seeing those who are hardworking, not much rely on government. If a state is like that, they're more forward to work, drive forward, and chase the materialistic. Where Victoria is more of liberal, lefty, having this sort of mentality of it makes it weak for the state, for the working class people. It makes it weaker. There's no drive, no nothing, and you guys kind of feel like what's between the lines what I'm trying to talk about. But I know I'm going off the topic comparison. What was the initiative for the Sydney bubble, and have that Sydney bubble. What I've noticed, there's a huge competitive when I was in Sydney in comparison to Melbourne. Everything is fast paced. There's a lot more to be done, but that's my opinion. But trying to analyze of understanding New South Wales, why there's more social problems, or there's a lot more services, there's a lot more jobs in comparison to New South Wales. It just doesn't make sense to me right now. To understand the norm, the culture, the ethics, it kind of draws one huge aspect. I can't guarantee, but one of the huge aspects. But yeah, that's the video. I'm just glad I actually managed to understand through all the way deep through. So yeah.